Hi, friends. Thank you for tuning in to the Concussion Coach podcast. I'm Bethany Lewis, the Concussion Coach. I'm a neurological occupational therapist and certified life coach, and I specialize in guiding people through their concussion recovery journey. I am passionate about helping people understand their injury, speed up their recovery, and reclaim control over their life post-concussion. The purpose of this podcast is to help increase awareness of concussions and the impact they can have on a person's life, and to bring hope to people who have suffered a concussion and those who love them. I firmly believe that sharing stories and knowledge about concussions will bring important light and understanding to this misunderstood and often invisible injury. The information in this podcast is meant to bring that awareness and hope and is not meant as medical advice. The opinions shared are those of the interviewees and my own. If you are suffering with lingering concussion symptoms, I have created a concussion coaching program specifically for you. I will be your mentor to guide you through your recovery journey, offering help with understanding and managing your symptoms, setting achievable goals, and learning how to manage your own thoughts and nervous system in order to get control over your life again. If this program sounds like something that would help you or someone you love, sign up for a free consultation. In the consultation, you'll get valuable information and resources and gain hope for your future. Sign up for your free consultation at the link in the show notes or at my website, www.theconcussioncoach.com. Hi, friends. Welcome back to the Concussion Coach podcast. I'm genuinely excited for today's interview. My guest today was a patient of mine at Cognitive Effects years ago, and somehow we stayed in touch and became friends, and he is now also a colleague of mine at Cognitive Effects. Heath Lorzel has a pretty gnarly experience to share, and yes, I just used the word gnarly, and he has a whole lot of wisdom that he's gained from it, and I'm genuinely excited to hear his perspective and have him share his awesomeness with you today. In typical Heath fashion, his response to my asking about a bio to read to introduce him was, "Surprise me." So I just snagged his bio from the CFX website and will read you some of it. Dr. Heath Lorzel received his PhD in aerospace engineering from Arizona State University. His background includes extensive work in machine learning, computational analysis, and prototype development in the fields of spacecraft propulsion, hypersonic reentry vehicles, spin spray chemical reactors, magnetic materials, metal air batteries, gas turbine compressors, hydraulic fracturing, solar power, hydro panels, multiplayer games, quantitative investing, and medical imaging. Dr. Lorzel first came to Cognitive FX as a patient in 2017, seeking treatment for lingering cognitive and physical deficits after contracting a viral encephalitis. After recovering, he joined the team in 2019 as the Director of Artificial Intelligence. His work includes the development of several machine learning algorithms that automate patient scheduling, brain MRI parcellation, fMRI processing, and analysis of new fMRI protocols. He has also developed prototypes of rehabilitation equipment based on his own experience recovering from a brain injury. So I'm actually really proud of myself for getting through that. When I was reading it to Thane earlier, I stumbled over like every other word. There's a lot of words there. So thank you for being with us today, Heath. I'm really excited to have you here.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. I appreciate you having me. And I know we've been trying to set this up for a while and we just haven't been able to get it to work. So I'm glad we were able to do this. And if I happen to find any of that wisdom loitering around here that you mentioned, I'll see if I can relay that. But no guarantees today.
All right, perfect. We'll take what we can get. But I also am glad that the stars aligned and we were able to make this happen today. So let's just start off hearing about your injury, your illness. What happened and how long ago was it?
Yeah. It was about 8 years ago, almost exactly 8 years ago. And, I was swimming along kind of in my life and my career. And one weekend I caught what I thought was a flu. And it just didn't go away. It just kept getting worse and worse. And it was on a Saturday, and I didn't think a whole lot of it. And Sunday I took it ezy, and I was in bad shape. But I just watched football, which is easy enough to do, flu or not. And then on Monday, when I went back to work, I found that I didn't remember how to use a computer. And again, I didn't think a whole lot about it. I just thought dehydrated or electrolytes, something like that. But then on Tuesday, I lost the ability to read, and Wednesday, I lost the ability to speak. And honestly, even then, I didn't think a whole lot about it. I just thought, really, brain is weird, salt or something, who knows? But it didn't get better. And, eventually I did go to a doctor, and they sent me right to the ER, and it was a viral encephalitis. And they never determined exactly which virus it was, but they did rule out a bunch. And the one that was going around at the time was West Nile. And, it was endemic in my area, and I had plenty of mosquito bites, and, it seemed like the right fit. So that was what they declared, even though they never directly found it. But yeah, it kind kind of started a very bad time, and spent about a year kind of relearning how to walk and how to speak. And I could do both, but not very well, and not later into the day. Mornings I was somewhat all right. I walked, there was a limp, I could speak, but I slurred my words. I really struggled to find words, and usually by about noon or so, I was pretty done. Afternoon, evening, I didn't speak or walk very much at all. I started using a cane, that kind of thing. So spent about a year like that, and kind of just suffered through it. And really, there wasn't anything available down here. And I see a hand raised on the video. So yeah. I see there is a question. I'll stop there.
I'm going to pause you because I have questions before you get further into this. So I'm just curious, when losing your ability to read and use a computer and speak, those things that didn't scare you, which is bizarre to me, but that's okay. Did you take work off? When you were realizing you couldn't do this, how did that impact your functioning throughout the day? And how long did it take you to get to the hospital? When did you go to the hospital? How many days did it last?
Yeah. It was about 6 weeks before I got to the hospital. And until that point, I was mostly off of work. I did have little spurts where I never felt good. I never felt okay, but I was able to do something like send an email. And at the time, I was telling them, there's something wrong. There's a fever. There's a flu. There's something that affected my brain. I don't know what. And so sometimes I would show up at work, and they actually just made fun of me, which I didn't much appreciate at the time. But really, that was the culture there. And in hindsight, we all kind of did that to each other. So some of that was good natured, but I just I didn't appreciate it when I was really hammered. But they definitely knew something was wrong. So they kind of eased up, and I did take a lot of time off. But it was at the 6 week mark where I was at work and I was at a meeting, and I just wasn't able to follow anything. They were having conversations, and I couldn't really interpret what they were saying. And they were starting to call on me for the kinds of questions that I was there for, and I just had no idea what to say. And eventually, I just kind of left. So that was when I knew, this is something worse than normal dehydration or electrolytes. 6
weeks sounds like a really long time. Had you seen a doctor prior to that? Had you gone in anywhere?
Actually, no, I hadn't. I think I'd spoken to a few, who were friends of mine online, and they kind of gave me the normal doctor thing of hey, I suggest you go in and see a doctor. But they didn't directly say, this is serious, get to an ER right now, which probably would have sent me to a doctor. They just kind of recommended it. And so, I filed the recommendations, and, that was about it. But, one of the things about this too is when your brain is damaged, it's unfortunately the same organ that has to determine whether or not you should address it. And it's similar to, things like addiction. It's when you're addicted, it's your brain that's affected. And then, that same brain has to say, no, I need help. And, that's why it doesn't work. If it's something like, your ankle that's busted, well, your ankle doesn't have to decide whether or not you need help. Your brain decides whether or not your ankle needs help. Your brain's still working. So, you go to a doctor. But I do think that was part of it. I think I was probably quite a bit more out of it than even I acknowledged. And I just kind of missed it. I didn't think too much about that.
Okay, that's fair. That is a good explanation. Thank you. And how long, when they realized what it was, how long were you in the hospital for a while, or what did that look like?
Yeah, I did go to the ER, and they gave me a check, and they did kind of confirm, there's an encephalitis here, but I was actually dismissed on the same day and told to follow up with a neurologist in a few days. And I did, and she did the same check, and she found the optic nerve blurring, which I guess is a marker of brain inflammation, and that was kind of it. She kind of just told me, go home, and it'll probably get better, and that was the end of it. And now I know, in hindsight, that I happen to have a pretty bad neurologist, because I've spoken to others no, you should have been on antivirals, anti-inflammatories, you should have had immunosuppressant kind of things. Yeah. But I didn't get any of that. So it was rather frustrating for my first little while.
Wow. So that was, it was just kind of okay, go figure it out. And then, it was just you needing to figure out how to manage yourself and your symptoms and work and all of that at the same time.
It was. And I asked them explicitly, as the months went on, I was going back for follow-up appointments, and I asked them kind of repeatedly for something, some level of treatment or rehab or something. And they flat out told me several times that nothing like that exists. They said there are things for people who've had strokes, hemorrhages, those kinds of things. But they said if anybody reached my level of functioning, they would graduate them from the program. And, it didn't make sense to me. I tell them, I can't work. I'm struggling to walk. My speech is still all weird. I kind of just sit at home all day, and a lot of times I don't even watch TV because it's just too much stimulus. I can't, follow along and understand. I just get nauseous from all the input, and still nothing. They just said kind of just get used to this. Maybe you'll get better, maybe not. It could be your life, and you just have to adapt. And that was all I heard from the kind of the conventional doctors down here.
And that was for about a year that you were dealing with this.
Yeah, that was about a year.
Any other symptoms that you haven't mentioned that you were dealing with specifically?
It would be quicker to give you a list of symptoms that I didn't have. So yeah, the left side was about half paralyzed. The vision was bad. Left eye worse than the right eye, but like the eyes just couldn't team together. I couldn't read a book. So, I did get some books. There were some brain injury books, some that you later recommended too. And I could read exactly 3 pages before the nausea overwhelmed me, and I had to take a break for about an hour, and then I could read 3 more.
Okay.
Had rather severe hyperacusis in both ears at the time, to the point where like I had to eat soft food because crunchy foods would cause horrible pain.
It was just too loud to eat crunchy food. That was
yeah. It was pretty horrible. And then, just any sort of cognitive symptom, it was very difficult to think, in just about every way. And then, like the kind of things that, prior to this, I didn't even know could break, things like temperature and blood pressure regulation is, who thinks about that until something breaks? I'd never even heard of that. But, sometimes I'd be freezing and sometimes I'd be extremely warm, and it had no correlation to the environment. Stand up too fast and you just fall right over, all sorts of little things like that the brain controls in the background without you thinking about.
Yes. Holy cow. Okay. So a year of this.
A year. Yeah.
And then what happened?
Yeah. So it was a particularly bad day. I happen to remember it was January 2017, and I had my wife was exercising at home, and the clanking of the weights was too much. So I had went into another room, and I closed the door, and I was just sitting there with no noise, no anything, and really, really suffering. And I felt like I had kind of expended my search for any sort of doctors or therapists or anybody who could treat me. And in hindsight, turns out I was very wrong. There were places I just wasn't searching correctly, but I did start searching for other people who had similar injuries. Because I knew, the Iraq and Afghanistan wars, we had a lot of people who've had, blasts from IEDs and, similar things. And they were coming back with similar injuries. It wasn't viral. That was, more of the concussion, but, kind of similar symptoms. I kind of started looking to see what treatments they did. And then I had a memory of actually an NFL game that I had watched. And it was Indianapolis Colts, and it was Austin Collie who had just taken a horrible hit. And I did later meet him, actually, and I don't think he likes being the poster boy for concussions in the NFL, but he doesn't have a choice because he was the one who got hit at precisely the time where we were starting to talk about this. But the game I was watching, he had just come back from a concussion, and he just took another real gnarly hit. And the announcers had just said something like, he's back, it's soon, let's try not to, get him hit. And he takes another one, and he goes down, and it looks like he seizes on the field. But it was horrifying to watch. But I remembered that, and I looked him up and wanted to see what he was doing. And he had gone to this clinic, this cognitive FX that you had mentioned, which I had never heard of. And I found an article about it, and they were describing it as like a brain boot camp. So, you go in and for a week, they beat you pretty hard, and you come out and you feel pretty good. So, he described it and he loved it. And after he left the NFL, he actually joined them. And I believe he did marketing and outreach for them for a while. And then I went online, I found some YouTube videos of kind of the same thing, just patients who had been through the treatment. And afterwards, they were talking about how much they recovered. And it looked real to me. Found some articles that Dr. Mark Allen had published on the scans that they offer. And, why not? Let's give it a shot. So I had to go online. I filled out the paperwork. I met with Dr. Fong and, got the consult. And, she flat out said, this is not our normal patient, but if you want to try it, come on up. I'm sure we can help you. And I did. So I came up, met you there, and it turned out to be real. 1 week, it wasn't a full recovery, but they never said it was going to be. But they said according to the scans it was about 70%. And that's about what I felt on my end. And I would have killed for 30. I would have gladly gone for 30% recovery, because it got me to the point where I can start to get back to my life, and now I can start to do other activities that maybe will get me part of the rest of that 30%.
Yes. Oh my gosh. That is crazy. So other than CFX, was there anything else that you had tried or been recommended to try?
Prior to CFX, yeah, there probably was. I reckon I've forgotten most of it because so much of it didn't work at all. I think the majority of it was, different medications. So, there was pain medication for headaches, which, sometimes they help, but they have their side effects. There were plenty of things like, stimulants in the morning and then, sedatives at night. And I really didn't enjoy any of those. They just had strange effects on me and they didn't treat anything. So, like the stimulant, yeah, it would make me more awake, but I was more awake with a brain injury. Like I was just, more wound up and, more anxious the whole day while I'm still unable to even watch TV. So, none of that stuff worked. I did see a neuro ophthalmologist who kind of checked the nuts and bolts and made sure my eyes were still in the head and attached to the brain. And I guess they are. And, that was it. Sent me on my way, said they were fine. I later saw a neuro-optometrist, which at the time I didn't understand the difference, but now I do. Neuro-optometrist kind of works with, how your eyes, function instead of how, the physical, how they're built into your skull, more how they function, how they team, how you use them. And that was way off. I actually did that the same week that I was going to Cognitive FX. And it was Dr. Devin Duvall, who's near Cognitive FX now. And that was another one where he checked it. It's like, no, these are way out of whack. We got to get them lined up. And that was another big help, getting those teamed to the point where they could work together. And I was no longer suppressing my left eye. That was a big improvement.
That's a big deal. Yes. And Dr. Duvall is the one that we have a podcast on a few episodes ago. So
good.
Into this, they should definitely go and listen to him because
I'll have to check that out. I bet that's interesting. He's one of my favorite guys.
Yeah, he's good. He's good at what he does, and he has a really interesting story, like backstory, concussion wise too. So you should definitely listen to it.
I've heard it. I've interrogated him a few times while I was a patient there, and he does tell the story, and it's a good one. He's one of those. I later did find 3 neuro-optometrists down in Phoenix where I live, and I actually saw all of them and was unimpressed. So I've needed further treatment, and I've actually flown to Utah just to see Dr. Duvall again.
Yeah, he's good. He's definitely good. So after your week at CFX, where I got to treat you during that week, and then I know that you came back for some booster days and stuff, right? I think I got to work with you again. Tell us a little bit more about how that progressed.
Yeah. So at the time, CFX pretty much just treated post concussion syndrome, and every now and then they would dabble with a patient who was willing to come in, but they didn't have a lot of experience with it. So when I left, I felt great. I felt like that's it. I'm on my way. And then, kind of slowly over a few weeks, I would start to degrade. And eventually, I did come back for another week of treatment. And again, I felt great, and I left and I started to degrade again. And I actually had 3 total weeks like that. And eventually what I found is the same virus that caused encephalitis had caused an autoimmune reaction. And I guess that's pretty common, and it is kind of common with any sort of brain injury is, any sort of, trauma to the brain, it's so sensitive. There's so much cleanup involved with, the cells, damaged, dying, and, blood vessels reorienting, that it's a very strong immune system response. So it's quite common to have autoimmune reaction. I didn't know it at the time. So eventually I did find it. It turned out to be thyroid. And once I got that under control, then the exercises from CFX started sticking. So I still knew what to do. I was in contact with the clinic all the time now, but I'd been there enough where I knew what to do, on my own also. So, once that fire was kind of put out, I would do those exercises. I'd feel better, which I usually did, but then they would hold and feel better for longer and longer. And eventually, I believe we did integrate all of that back into the treatment at CFX. Now, for patients who we kind of suspect might have something similar, we do blood draws and we check for those things. And, sometimes I think oftentimes we will refer them to, an endocrinologist or, naturopath, those kinds of things to get that under control, maybe before treatment or at the same time as treatment, or, whenever really works, but kind of integrate that into everything, kind of based off of what we learned from that.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. I think that is definitely a piece that is not very well known and talked about. So I think it is really important for people to be aware of that. So yeah, thank you very much for bringing that up. Okay. We're going to go back a little bit again in time for a second. Curious how this injury affected the people closest to you.
Oh yeah, that's a big question. Well, not in any way that I enjoyed, I'll say that. I think my wife probably took the brunt of it. In fact, I shouldn't even say probably. I'm certain that she took the brunt of it. I'm certain that I was probably very difficult to live with for a while. And then there's always always that thing too, where you're watching somebody that you care about suffer. And, I'm certain that's quite difficult. I've been on the other end of that too. I know it's terrible. And I always felt bad about that. There just wasn't anything that I could do. Because when you have that, you break a leg, you break an ankle, you want to say, no, I'm fine. Don't worry about me. Don't worry. I'm fine. Yeah, I'm in pain. Don't worry. In a couple of weeks, I'll be fine. With this, I couldn't say that. I wasn't getting better for a long time, and I wasn't fine, and I wasn't able to do a whole lot at all. Yeah. So, I'm sure that was the biggest part. Kind of outside of that, of course, family's always concerned, but same thing. They don't entirely know what to do. They offer their support when they can, and a lot of them were very supportive. It also kind of shows you, which ones step up at the right times, right? You get somebody. I might as well say this. This is going out in public. Maybe they'll hear it. I'd hate for them to hear this, but my in-laws were particularly supportive, and I got a lot of messages from them asking if they could help, financially or with drives or anything like that, which was very nice of them. So yeah, I don't like the idea of them hearing me talking nice things about them, but it's the truth. They were very kind to me during that. And then, one circle further out would be, work. Obviously, I wasn't able to continue at my prior capacity. I could do about 10 hours a week. It was about 2 hours a day in the morning when I was somewhat functional. And my calculations, I'm an engineer, so, that's what they were relying on, is my analysis of these different systems. I could still do that, but it would take me about 2 hours to write an email to communicate it to them, and I'd need some help proofreading it. So a lot of adjustment there, and I'm sure a lot of accommodation on their end to kind of work around that limitation.
But they did it, and how long did you stay with them?
I actually stayed with them until I joined CFX. So I was injured October 2015, and it was about 3.25 years after that I stayed with them. That's about how long it took to get over that first year of walking and speaking, find CFX, recover there, find the autoimmune, and then kind of recover to the point where I felt like I was able to take another job, learn new things and function to the point where I'd be of use to somebody new, as opposed to somebody who kind of already had the momentum with me. Yeah. So I joined CFX in February 2019.
Okay. Awesome. So some people might be surprised to hear that a concussion clinic could be helpful for someone suffering from a viral encephalitis.
Yeah.
So why did the CFX treatment work for this illness? And now that you work there, how has your experience with this illness helped you to understand the experience of patients who deal with concussions?
Yeah. So my understanding is the similarity between the two is the inflammation. Mm-hmm. So when you get a concussion, there's a lot of theories on exactly why it is your brain kind of goes whack. The one that I've read that I think fits the best is that you have your gray matter, your white matter, your cerebral spinal fluid, all these different structures inside that have these different inertial densities. And what that means is when you take some kind of impact where your head is violently accelerated to a side, to one side, or forward, back, or whatever, the objects inside your brain, like the actual structures that make up your brain, accelerate at different rates. And when they do that, it creates this shearing between them, and you actually kind of rip open these structures. So whether it's synapses or vascular structures or whatever, you get these different movements between them. I think that's probably the most accurate explanation. I'm sure there are other processes too, but if that's a concussion, the majority of people, I think it's 70 to 80% recover within a few weeks, and they never notice anything else. Everything kind of reattaches and starts firing again, and you're fine. When you get what's called Post Concussion Syndrome, it means it's gone on for about 2 months or longer. And once you're at that point, now you're dealing with things that are more like the inflammation that is a result of all that damage trying to repair itself and cleanse itself, and these dead cells that are being cleaned up and so forth. And those processes get overwhelmed, you get inflamed, and then your connections with the blood vessels start to malfunction. At CFX, we call that neurovascular dysfunction, where your neurons and synapses and everything are requiring a certain amount of blood flow, and the blood vessels simply aren't capable of providing it or responding to those demands anymore for any number of reasons. And you kind of get caught in those patterns from that inflammation. For viral encephalitis, there was no impact, there was no shearing, it was just the straight inflammation. So I think I maybe skipped that acute phase of a concussion, went right to that post-concussion type syndrome, and then just kind of stayed there. So I have no idea if any of that's true. And my full disclaimer, and I know you use the doctor title in front of me, it is engineering. There's no medicine here. It's just kind of my experience as a patient, the things that I've read about and learned from other people. Some of these other people do have degrees, but that's my best guess as to why what happened to me, what happens post concussion syndrome, kind of why they're similar, and then why a similar treatment worked for both.
Okay. Thank you you have a gift for explaining things really well. I appreciate that. Thank you. And I guess that now is a good time to ask you about this too. I am curious, if you don't mind sharing, we can edit this out if you don't want to, but I would love to hear Tomar. Tell us about Tomar, if that's...
Tomar, yes. No, I'm happy to. And I should mention, I gave Bethany here permission to ask any questions that she wishes, because that's always how it's most fun. And we'll see. We are in a time of a lot of canceling, so we'll see if I have friends in a career after this. But this is a pretty safe question, so I think we're all good here. But Tomar, Tomar is one of the more interesting things I've built, and one of the very few that's actually worked. And how this came about is this was long after CFX, and actually after I joined them. And one of the biggest symptoms that I was still having at the time, and I still have, a lot of, not as much as I used to, but I still have it, is the hyperacusis. And everything is recovered in the right ear. The right ear is totally fine. It's just in the left now. But, loud sounds and things like restaurants where, there's a lot of different sounds cause me a lot of problems. And I get overwhelmed and I get nauseous. And I was looking for a treatment for that. And I was talking with Dr. Allen, he was my boss at CFX. And, he gave me some very science-y sounding explanations for what's going on inside the ear. And I didn't entirely understand them, but I took them and I looked them up later. It was in an email, so I could, go back and forth and, find the dictionary and read some things. But I didn't quite understand how all that worked. But we also had a new guy who was Andy Clower, who had just joined us. And he's listed as a personal trainer. But once you talk to him for 2 seconds, you realize he's a lot more than that.
They call him the Wizard. So
we call him the Wizard. Yeah, this is the guy who showed up with his staff and his book of spells and started reading from the book and fixing things that we didn't even know could break in our patients. But he became the Wizard. And new guy. Why not? I'll ask him. And he told me he's had some luck treating people with this using what he calls tonotopic map retraining. And tonotopic maps, that's another thing I had to go look up. Apparently, we have at least 6 of these inside our auditory cortex. And what it is a tonotopic map converts sound information, kind of these packets of sound, into some other structure. So the one he was talking about was localization. So if I'm sitting here, I close my eyes, I hear a sound, it comes in, I can probably point to the direction that I think the sound is coming from. And that's because that particular tonotopic map has taken, these frequencies and pulses and whatever, and converted it into this kind of geographical display kind of inside my head, which is an amazing process. If you think about it, is all the disparate timescales and, all the encoding that has to happen for that to take place. It's amazing we have that. So that's one tonotopic map. And then understanding speech, I think, is another one. There's several others, and we honestly don't know how many we have because there's just so many things that go on in there. But he was doing things where he'd have somebody close their eyes, he'd snap in front of them, they try to point, they're probably off because that part is damaged, and then they try to correct that. And I was thinking about that, and that's somewhat similar to what another clinic is doing. There's I think it's called the Mind Eye Institute in Chicago with Dr. Deborah Zielinski. And she does something similar where you close your eyes, you ring a bell, you point to the direction you think it's coming from. And if you're off, she fits you with these glasses with lenses and prisms to try to bring your eyes and ears back into alignment. And I apologize to her if I've misstated her work. That's my best understanding of it when I looked into where to go. But, kind of the same concept. If your eyes are saying, sound is coming from this spot, and your ears are saying, no, it's coming from this spot, that's a mismatch in your sensory input. If you have a mismatch, that's going to elevate it in your consciousness. And if you get too much of that, you're going to get nauseous, and eventually you will have a seizure, which, sometimes I did. So if you could get that under alignment, it goes back into your subconscious, which is where it belongs. And, you should feel better. And I was starting to think about, how we might do this in a more, automated fashion or a quicker fashion or whatever. And that was where I came up with Tomar. And, Tomar stands for a tonotopic map retrainer. But what it is it's a system of speakers kind of all around your head. And each speaker has, a light if you need it and a button attached to it. And same thing as, clicking your fingers. You can just close your eyes, hit go on the computer that, runs it, and have one of the speakers start playing, and, you just reach out and try to find it. And like once you feel like you found it, hit the button that's next to the speaker. And, if that's it, that speaker turns off and another one goes, or if it's not it, you can keep trying. But you can create, a lot of fun games with this. And, once you kind of have the feel of it, or, a patient starts, getting good at it, then you can start adding some other things, maybe some vision exercises, some balance exercises, right in the middle of it, start getting all these systems kind of reintegrated. So the first one I built was a total piece of junk. And I think I spent $200 on the parts. And I built it in my house, and I had 8 speakers. It was attached to 2x6s, and I plugged it into a very simple Raspberry Pi computer and programmed a simple interface, and I got it to work. And I wouldn't say it fixed everything I had, or even most of the things I had, but it did definitely fix some of it. So things like the straight hyperacusis, the loudness, it didn't do anything for. But the crowd noises, the restaurant noises, it actually was a big help. And I think just kind of feeling like I knew where sounds were coming from again, just, made it easier for me to tolerate those kinds of environments. So once I had that, I reported it back to my bosses. I did it on my own time. I was only hourly at CFX at the time. This was over winter break where, I wasn't being paid. So, it's kind of my little invention, but I told them, like, I've got something here. I think you want it. I described the whole thing to them. And, it was like I did build it on my time, but I kind of considered them to be, the fathers of it too, since it was a lot of their theories. So it was a few months later, I signed a full-time contract with them. And when I did, I gifted them the device. And then we built the next iteration of the prototypes. And now we have 2 of them. We have 2 what we call Mark IIIs, the third iteration. One of them's at my house and one of them is at CFX. And last I heard, it's doing pretty well. I think Nate is on it. And there are some others, but I think he's leading it. And about once a week, I get a report back from him that he found some cool little thing that he fixed in a patient because he did it a certain way, something I never would have thought of because I just don't have a mind for that. I can build it, but that's about it. But I hear they seem to like it up there.
Yeah, no, I've heard very good things about it as well. And I think it's it's one of those things that people don't think about having been disrupted, a system that could be disrupted and the impacts that it could have. And it's really, really awesome to see that working and helping people. I think it does go to the nervous system piece as well, right? If your underlying system that's supposed to be keeping you safe doesn't recognize where sounds are coming from, then it's going to heighten everything, and that can increase that pain and everything, right? It definitely impacts a lot more than just, my hearing is a little off. So
I think that's definitely true. And I think brains are just kind of like that. When a brain is uncertain about something, I don't think it likes it. And it could be absolutely anything. Sensory input, I think, is very primal. So I think that kind of throws it off the most. And we've all seen this. That's what motion sickness is. You're on a plane and your eyes and your butt and your feet all say, I'm not moving. Your inner ear says, no, I'm moving a lot. And you're trying to figure that out. And eventually you just can't handle it. You get nauseous. Eventually if 20 or 30 flights, you kind of get used to it, and you start to tune it out, and that's all right too. But stress, kind of the same thing. Uncertainty can lead to a lot of stress, and eventually that leads to nausea. I think that's all the same circuits. Yeah, and then I probably should mention it too, because there was a bit of a surprise with Tomar, one that I was happy to see, even though I didn't see it coming. But I was developing that at the same time COVID hit, and it got put on the back burner because, we were all just trying to survive in business. But, as COVID passed, we went back to it. And I had a friend who got COVID in the same wave that I got it. And I had made a full recovery, and she had almost made a full recovery. She had that classic symptom where she couldn't smell anything. And I was thinking about that. And I told her, like, that's the olfactory nerve. And that's real close to the vestibulocochlear nerve, which is what Tomar targets. And honestly, I don't know anything. I don't know if it'll help or whatever, but we have had some luck in the clinic where if we target one area that's adjacent to something you're having a problem with, we can kind of get that blood flow to jump over and start hitting that nerve again. So I told her, like, if you want to come over, I'll put you through some exercises on it. Again, I'm not a doctor. It's strictly just, it's exercises. There's nothing invasive. Worst case scenarios, you do a little cardio and you get an apology from me, but best case, maybe I can kind of, wake up that nerve a little bit. But she came over and 30 minutes, we got it. We got the olfactory nerve to fire up, and, she started crying in the kitchen. And then, her husband is actually my personal trainer. He's a professional cage fighter, kind of a tough guy, but, she started crying, and then the two of us had to do that macho thing where we look away and pretend we're not, about to go to. But we did get it, and it woke her up, and I've been in contact with her ever since. It never went away. It just, she just needed that little click to kind of fire it up once, and then that carried the rest of the, her recovery. She got to like 80% that night, and then got to 100% within a few weeks. So that was another one where I reported it back to CFX, and the theory did seem sound. And I believe Nate I think he's gotten about a dozen post-COVID patients to get their smell back by now. And it doesn't work from everyone. I'm 344 myself. I don't know Nate's numbers on that, but they have had pretty good luck with kind of just getting that nerve to light up again.
Yeah. Oh, that's so cool. I know. I actually did an interview with Nate a while back on his experience. He had carbon monoxide poisoning, so his is a little bit different. But when we talked, I don't think he had been using Tomar yet. But now I'm like really wanting to follow up with him, get more details on that.
Yeah, he has all those details. I know he's been taking very detailed notes. He shared some of them with me, and I consider him a far greater expert on Tomar than I am at this point. So yeah, and another interview with him would be fantastic.
Yeah, I might have to bring him on again. It is so cool. So I love that has helped in, again, ways that people would not necessarily expect. So really, really cool. I'm curious as to what things were most helpful for you. And this is, again, kind of going back, but what was helpful for you in discovering and loving yourself post-injury illness? Because it kind of throws things off, right? Like your whole life has been turned upside down. How do you handle that emotionally?
That's a good question. Discovering and loving. Those were big words. I'll see if I can answer them to the best of my ability. Yeah, I think dealing with it post accident. Maybe that's as close as I can get, but it's a challenge, and it's one of those things where whenever I'm asked a question that's similar to this, I'd like to be able to say something like, I fought hard, I fought the good fight, I never gave up, I kept moving forward, all that stuff, and absolutely none of that's true. None of it's true. I did fight, and then I'd have setbacks, and I'd get real discouraged, and then I'd find some other treatment, and I'd fight some more, and then I'd have further setbacks, and I'd go through a real dark time. And I think I would say probably the best thing to say with this is, like, whatever it is you're going through, like, it's okay. You're going to have times where you're absolutely not going to be okay. You're going to have times where you start thinking of very dark things, and nobody likes to talk about, I considered suicide, whatever, and I do talk about it. I did consider it, and obviously I opted against it. But I think sometimes it's very easy to be very hard on yourself when those thoughts start flowing in, and you just kind of realize, pretty much anybody who's going to be in this situation is going to have those similar thoughts. Like it's okay, let them pass. Like they're in. Yes, tonight is going to suck because I have a horrible migraine and the tinnitus is flaring, and there's absolutely nothing I could do except sit here and pretty much hate everything. Right? And it feels like you're not supposed to do that, but you're going to do it. Right? You're going to do it whether you give yourself permission or not. So just, okay, I don't want to say be at ease. It's not going to be an easy night, but let it go. Tomorrow when you wake up, maybe you'll feel better, and you can move on from there without beating yourself up too much. And I think that's kind of important for any sort of illness, and then anything that's kind of related to grieving. And I do think there is kind of a grief component to this, because you have lost a lot of what you had before, and maybe in the future you'll gain some of it back. Maybe you'll gain things that you didn't have before, but you're not there yet, right? So right now you've just lost, and there is a grief component. And some days you're not going to be okay with grief. Some days that's it. You're not going to get out of bed, and just it's okay, right? Being okay with kind of that not being okay. I think that's probably the biggest key that I like to share with people when they're really in kind of the worst parts of it.
I appreciate you saying that very much. And I think something that you didn't say, but that you implied here, was that it's worth getting up tomorrow. Like that I assume you're glad that you chose not to go the suicide route.
Well, tomorrow might be the best day of your life. You don't know that yet.
Yes.
So it could be the worst. Don't know that either. But it could be the best. It would be unfortunate if you missed that. And that's, it's another thing that, I know that kind of sounds like a platitude. And, sometimes it sounds like I'm sitting here saying these things like, every day is a gift. And it's like, no, I'm not. I was in a horrible spot. If you had talked to me during one of those times, I would have sounded very different than I sound right now. But that is one thought that I've had, is like, I've beaten everything up until this day, and then I've had good days after that. So even though today is absolutely horrid, and, I am having those very dark thoughts, I've beaten every other one of those dark thoughts. So let's get through this one, and we'll see what tomorrow is. And to answer your question, yes, of course I'm happy. I'm happy I did not go through with that. There were times in the past where I was not happy. There were times where I came out of a seizure and I was upset that it didn't kill me. And again, it's a little bit hard to say, but I like to share those things to let other people know that it does happen. It's not just you, and then it kind of drifts into the past. But yeah.
Well, I will tell you that I and very, very, very many other people are also very happy that you're here and sharing this with us. So thank you. And again, kind of going back to those times before, were there any things that people said or did that were the most helpful for you?
Yeah, most helpful for me. I think this might be unique to me, but probably the best thing was kind of just to leave me be. And it sounds weird, but you're going through so much nausea, overstimulation, all these kinds of things. So anytime somebody would come in and ask me a question, even something helpful like, hey, do you need anything? Right. Like that's actually kind of a complex process, because first I have to hear it, which is painful. My ear hurts, and then, processing the information. Then I have to understand it, and cognitively I'm messed up. And then I have to think, oh, do I need something? Now it's the decision, and decisions were just awful. And, sometimes you need that. My wife will come in and, needs to feed me. So of course it needs to happen sometimes. But, when I would get it a lot from people who were legitimately trying to help, it was really just painful a lot of the time. And I try to share that with them in kind of the least insulting way that I knew how. Is telling them I'm not trying to be rude. It's just sometimes it's difficult for me to speak. That's why I don't respond every time, and try to be as open as I could with that. But yeah, kind of just letting me get through those darkest times. In the dark, quiet room, sleeping off whatever it is. And maybe just on the other end, like supplying me with like the basics, water, that kind of thing, or, keeping the dog away so she's not loud, that kind of thing, the things that I probably wasn't very aware of at the time. That was hugely helpful.
Okay, that's good to know. And this is, I guess, kind of along the same general lines, but what advice would you give to people who are loving and supporting people who've had concussions or other life-changing injuries or illnesses? I know recently I did a podcast about how people with concussions are not responsible for how others respond to their injury. And you have some opinions on that. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on all of this.
Yeah. I guess those are kind of two separate questions there, or two separate responses I would have for helping somebody with a concussion. It is a challenge. So, we do work at, Cognitive FX right now. I do consider that to be the best brain rehabilitation clinic probably in the world. It is something I recommend if somebody's having, symptoms after about 2 months to start getting some treatment like that. And even if it's not that, get some form of treatment in some of these real rehabilitation centers. Yeah, that's hugely helpful. For, caregivers, it's kind of just, I think it's kind of just responding, whatever it is that, that person needs at the time. If they can't handle, taking care of the kids, maybe get somebody who can step in. If it's a financial thing, you step in there. But so much of that is just kind of, treading water until it's over, with the exception of, the treatments that we're talking about. But even then, but before you get in, it's kind of like that. And then afterwards, there is kind of a recovery time after these treatments. And there is a little bit of, delay and the things to get better. So it does continue for a little bit. On your other comments about, not being responsible for how other people respond to your injury. This was one where you had mentioned it about a week ago, and I said, hey, let's talk about that on the podcast. I did give you free rein for any questions, but this is one where I said, let's, make sure to toss this in. This is one where I do have some advice, and I think it runs counter to pretty much everything that I've seen in the support groups. So don't follow my advice just because I say it. Another disclaimer. I will not say all of my ducks are in a row, but this is one where I've had a lot of luck with it. The one that I see that comes up a lot in these support groups is people are saying something like, I'm going in for a job interview and I don't know what to tell them about my brain injury. Should I mention it? And almost universally, the response is, don't say it. Don't say anything about it. It's a disability. And if you mention it, the interviewer is going to use it as an excuse to hire somebody else. And you are protected by disability laws, of course, but they're never going to say, hey, I didn't hire this person because they have a brain injury. They'll say, oh, we went another way, just using it as an excuse. And I actually see it the opposite. I think it is in your best interest to go ahead and train other people how to respond to you. And maybe it's not your responsibility, but I think it actually makes your life easier. So, in that scenario, when you're interviewing and you're sitting there, and you always think, I do think that people with these kinds of injuries always think that they can probably hide it a little bit better than we actually can. And I don't think we can. I think we're going to have an eye twitch, or we're going to slur a word or something. And so, you're sitting there with the interviewer, and I want that interviewer to think, is this person right for the job? How much do we pay him? How quick can we get him in? Those are the kinds of things I want him to think about. Instead, he's sitting there thinking, what's wrong with his eye? Should I call an ambulance? Did he snort something before he came in? And when they read something like that on your face, I think they fill their own minds with whatever is scariest. Whatever is scariest to that individual at the time, I think, is what they start thinking. So I always say, just be totally upfront, 100%. So, I like to say it as soon as I notice that they notice something. My eye starts to go weird. I'll tell them, yeah, I know. It was about 8 years ago I had a brain injury, and I'm doing a lot better now. These things that we're talking about now, of course, some I can do, but every now and then this eye gets weird. Sometimes this arm is a little bit funny, and you're going to see it sometimes, and just kind of leave it at that. And I think that's helpful. because, right away they were thinking horrible things. And I just told them, no, it's not. This is not anything scary. It was horrible 8 years ago, but right now I'm sitting here in front of you and it's okay. I think that takes a lot of the tension out of it. And I actually think it makes them a lot more likely to hire you than, to be wondering what's wrong with you and then, kind of have to figure it out later. And then, the second part of that equation is, once they know what's wrong, the TBI, ABI, acquired brain injury, whatever it is, they don't always know how to deal with that. And, I think this is true for, people who are grieving, people who are, disabled, wheelchair, those kinds of things. I think we've all seen somebody kind of like in a motorized wheelchair, and it's like, okay, I don't want to stare, but also like I don't want to not stare. I don't want him to think I'm trying to avoid him. We kind of get tangled up in our heads because we don't always know how to deal with somebody with a disability. And when you do that, I think you start looking to the person with the disability to kind of teach you how to respond to it. So in my case, I like to say directly, yeah, I've had a brain injury. It's okay. And as soon as I say it's okay, then okay, he's okay with it, so I can be okay with it. And just make it totally clear. You can ask me anything you want about it. If you see something, you can mention it. If you have something coming up, hey, there's a meeting, there's 8 people in there, it'll be kind of loud. Is that something you can come to or not? Ask me that question. I want you to. Right. And then I'll respond, yes or no. And either way is totally fine. No hard feelings either way. You're not insulting me by asking me about my brain. I want you to ask me about my brain. And I think that kind of brings down the tension, the uncertainty, all that with the conversation. And actually, I think it gets a much more favorable response from the person on the other end.
I like that. Okay. I see where you're coming from in your response. Because when we were talking about it before, I was like, I didn't fully understand, but I really appreciate that. And I definitely think that I like the being upfront policy. I think that it kind of gives a signal that I'm okay with me, so you can be okay with me too, which I think is important.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I think, that when they don't know how to respond, they're kind of looking for somebody to tell them how to respond. And, the best person to tell them is me. It's my injury. I'll tell you, it's fine. Just ask me. And So we had talked about this about a week ago, and about 3 days ago, I was actually at a poker tournament at a local casino down here. And there's 5 or 6 tables, and then the dealers kind of shuffle between the tables. And I had a dealer who sat down at the table, and as soon as he sat down, he got his cards in order, chips or whatever. As soon as he had that, he said to the whole table, "Just so all of you know, I'm 100% deaf." And I had this dealer 3 times that night. He said that every time he sat down, and I was thinking about that because it was so nice. Like if he hadn't said that, maybe I would have, said something in a hand and, he didn't respond to me and I didn't know why. And so I'm thinking, oh, this guy's a jerk or he's standoffish. Like, no, he's deaf. That's fine. But he announced it at the beginning. So all of us knew exactly how to compensate for it. And of course, none of us think less of him for being deaf. So why should anybody think less of me for having a brain injury? It's not something I did. It's just something that happened. So, he was absolutely upfront, and I thought that was totally right. It made things so easy. And it kind of just solidified, my opinion of, same thing. The more upfront I am, the more, how to adapt to me, and we can just be open about it.
Yes, I think a little bit of information can go a long way in helping people understand and have compassion for each other. And I think I totally agree with that. And I really like that. And I think when we were talking about this via text the other day, my response to your initial response was just that my purpose in that episode and that point that I was trying to make was that to help people realize that they're not and not trying to say don't tell people what has happened with you, but just knowing, like, letting go of the people pleasing desire to control how other people, like whether they're disappointed or put off by you needing to take care of yourself. And so not feeling guilty for how other people are responding to what you're dealing with. I think that's kind of the point that I was trying to make. And you said you had some thoughts about that as well. So I'd like to hear those too.
Yeah, I did. And I guess it depends on how philosophical we want to get today, which usually I tend to go quite a bit down this rabbit hole. But yeah, I mean, it's absolutely true. You're not responsible for somebody else's, behavior. I think you're responsible for yours. And I think there are certain things that you can do to kind of maximize those best responses that you get back. And this is where we'll get philosophical. But something I thought about a long time ago is like my wife and I are very different people. She when she's in public with strangers, she tends to be very introverted, and I am an introvert, but I'm also one of those guys who likes to say stupid things. So I'll be in line with a cashier and I'll make some dumb joke, some dad joke or whatever, and the cashier maybe likes it because they're bored, and my wife is sitting there and she's just rolling her eyes, just wants to get out as fast as possible. But what ends up happening is, if her and I were to go through the same line at about the same time of day, we would actually have very different experiences. And I think that's true in probably every interaction that you have in every part of your life, everywhere. And so, if somebody were to, go to a city and, hey, this city's great. And somebody else goes to the same city and says, hey, this city sucks. It's like, well, is it great or does it suck? And it's like, well, there are different opinions, but also, person number one was very extroverted and, they explored all these different areas and they talked to everybody and said, hey, everyone's friendly. And, person number two was maybe having a bad day and, got into a little bit of an argument and, they got a different response. And it's the same city. It's the same people in the same city. The difference was that, you came in and you kind of projected a different person onto the city. And then, it gets reflected back to you. And what gets reflected back is going to have elements of your projection. That's a philosophical point. So, there is no one world, right? There's 7 billion different worlds because every one of us emits a little bit different signal. Everyone gets a different signal reflected back to them. And, that reflected signal does consist of the world, but also what you sent out. So, kind of going back to that, being open and, you're not responsible for the other person's opinion, but if I send out that signal to you that, says, hey, I'm okay, it's open, ask me any questions you want, don't worry about it, there's no tension here, I think I'm going to get a much more favorable response a much greater amount of the time than if I'm kind of closed off and it's like, yeah, I got hurt, you can't ask me about it, the laws are protecting me, that kind of thing. So yeah, I usually try to advise people that, try to be just as direct as possible. No tension, no you're not wound up. You're not going to get mad at them for certain things. And I think you get a lot of that back if you do.
Yeah. Okay. I'm 100% actually on board with what you just said.
Well, I'm not sure if any of it made any sense, but
it does
I gave it a go.
And I think that it kind of goes to the point of being really intentional about how you want to see the world and do things and how you want to project yourself. I think that's, yeah, I could go on all day talking about this and how it can impact everything. But yes, I will leave it at that because you put it very well and I agree. So thank you for sharing that. And I think that can be really helpful as we're thinking about, how we interact with others when we're dealing with something. If we can get good with ourselves and, like you said, be okay with whatever experience we're having in that moment, that can actually help us to lift ourselves further as we're moving forward.
Yeah, well put.
All right. Well, thank you for that. Okay. So, how are you doing? Are we good to ask a couple more questions?
Yeah, I'm good. Hit me.
Okay. All right. So if you could go back in time, what advice would you give to yourself in the early days of your illness?
Oh, yeah, that's a good one. I would say purchase as much Bitcoin as you can and sell somewhere around 65,000. I think that would probably be pretty good, but that's maybe not where we're headed here. Yeah. So, I mean, obviously, the treatment that took me way too long to find. And I've thought about that before. Like I would have done the sequence differently. I would have done it much sooner. I just didn't know about it at the time. And CFX was highly experimental, and the marketing wasn't really out there. So I don't think anybody really knew a whole lot yet. When I found it I went up March 2017. I think they had treated 200 people, and now we've done several thousand. So yeah, I just, the information just wasn't there. But if I could, I would have told myself about it. So get up there. But as far as the order, what happened is at about the 1.5 year mark, I did the brain boot camp at CFX, and it was helpful. But I still had the autoimmune thing that I didn't know about. And then I treated that, and a few other things. Hyperbaric oxygen was helpful too. I would have reversed that order, and that's actually the advice that I give now when we have somebody with a kind of a post encephalitis coming into the clinic is get the autoimmune under control first, because you can go in and kind of rebuild the house inside your head, but if the fire's still raging, it's just going to burn it down again in a few weeks. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense, and you will feel better, but you need to get that fire under control first. So I do like to say, treat the general health first. Any sort of autoimmune, any sort of hormone thing, a vitamin deficiency thing, sunlight, all those kinds of things, get them under control. If you're diabetic, make sure you're probably not going to get cured, but get it, your numbers in the right range. Get that as good as you can, and then go in for the brain boot camp. Because if that's under control, the boot camp will be more successful while you're there. A little bit easier for you to do it. And then afterward, it's going to stick, and you're probably going to be all good. Yeah, so I think that's probably the big one. I always advise, autoimmune, general health first, brain boot camp second. Even though I do work at the brain boot camp place. We do still have a part of that. We do the blood test and we send you out to the MD and whatever, and then come in and do our treatment.
Yeah, no, that's really good. And I'm curious, how did they resolve the autoimmune issues that you were dealing with?
Yeah, it was three things. It was Hashimoto's thyroiditis. So my thyroid gland was under attack from anti-thyroid antibodies, and it was clearly affecting my head. And there's a little bit of a controversy on this because there is something called Hashimoto's encephalitis. And the conventional wisdom, I think, right now is that about 200 people worldwide have ever had that. And what it is, it's the same antibodies that attack the thyroid, but instead of attacking the thyroid, it's attacking the brain. And there are doctors actually on both sides of an opinion on this. And some of them say there's no such thing as Hashimoto's encephalitis. It's actually, cognitive effects that you are experiencing because your thyroid gland is under control and your hormones are so weird, so you can't process, all these things inside your brain. And there are some other doctors who say, yes, it does exist, and it's much more common than 200 people worldwide. And that's why every single person with a thyroid issue seems to have a cognitive issue too. I actually don't know which one of those is true, but it doesn't matter. Treat it. So for me, number one was diet. And it turned out to be gluten for me, but I always tell people, check your big ones. It's gluten, dairy, and sugar. And maybe you can handle all three, and maybe you can handle none of them, but find out, pull them out from your diet, see if you feel better. And I almost guarantee you're going to. And then, you can kind of put one back in, here and there and see where things land. And for me, gluten, I can't even look at it or I get sick. Sugar, I can handle some. I try to stay on the low side, but it's not a big deal. Dairy, I can have as much as I want. That's personally where I've landed. I've known people who've been in every combination of those three. So that's number one, diet. Number two was getting my hormones back under control. So my thyroid gland was damaged. So I took thyroid replacement for some time. And felt better almost immediately as soon as it was back in my body. And then number three was kind of the inflammation. So think fish oils and vitamin deficiencies. I was low in vitamin D. I believe that's an anti-inflammatory. I'm not sure, but fish oil is definitely an anti-inflammatory. I was low in a few other things, and got those back in order. And then what I've kind of recently learned is be careful with those vitamins. So there are certain vitamins. If I remember correctly, it is B6. A, E, D, and K are the vitamins that don't just flush out of your body. Everything else does. But if you take too many over too long a period, you can kind of build up. So they're great and you will feel better, but kind of watch your blood levels and just be a little bit careful with them when you take them. I don't advise not taking them. You absolutely should take them if you're deficient, but just get back to your normal and then don't push it past that. And then, should I mention that? What the heck? I'll mention it. Yeah, I think it's in the literature, so I think I'm safe here. But I did eventually heal my thyroid, and I was a big fan of it. It's called low-level light therapy, and it's popular in a bunch of different places now. It's anti-inflammatory, it is regenerative, but it's those lights that some physical therapist clinics use. That half of them are red, and half of them you can't see because they're infrared. But it actually is in the literature. They've done the double-blind studies where they've taken people who've had hypothyroidism from Hashimoto's, and they've given half of them the light and half of them didn't. And the half with the light either needed no medication afterwards for the thyroid replacement, or they needed much less medication. And then when they scanned them with the ultrasound, they found that their nodules had shrunken and their thyroid glands had started to recover. So I do have good thyroid numbers now. I'm taking no medication after the LLLT. I have not done the ultrasound to see how the goiters are. I know I used to have real big goiters. I don't know if they've shrunk or if they're just holding steady, but I do know I feel much better, and I am off of all that medication. But for a while there, that was the key to getting back.
That's amazing. Did you have a specific doctor, like endocrinologist, that you were using that helped with managing all of that?
I did have an endocrinologist who, to be perfectly honest, I found not to be helpful. He was one of those endocrinologists have a reputation of being particularly conservative. And there probably are outstanding ones out there. I know other people have had a different response than what I had, but mine actually refused to treat me because my number was still inside the bracket. And it was at the absolute low end, where if he had tested me about 3 hours later in the day, I would have fallen below the bracket. But because I was inside, he wouldn't treat me. And later I ended up going to a naturopath. And she looked at it and it's like, yeah, it is at the absolute low end, but you also are just reeking of every single symptom of this, so we're going to treat you. And she gave me the medication. By that evening, I felt better. So it's one of those, I don't want to say, naturopaths are better than endocrinologists, because I really do think it's individual specific. But I will say that if you are seeing a doctor and you're not feeling well, and the doctor is saying things like, why don't you come back in 6 months? maybe go find somebody else, push a little harder on him. If they don't budge, go see somebody else. And it's like, I know you could see him in 6 months, but you're sick right now. Sometimes you just can't or shouldn't wait that long. So, if you have to dance around the doctors, if you have to, go to 12 doctors before you find one that makes you feel better, by all means do that.
Yeah. And there's nothing to prevent you from going back in 6 months if you've already seen other people that actually help. So
absolutely. Yeah.
You can still do that. So how are you doing today? What are you still dealing with? And what have you found to be helpful in managing any continuing emotional, mental, physical challenges?
Well, I'm speaking about as coherently as I did before the injury. I'll say that. It's not 100%, but I never was. So that's certainly an improvement. I do work. I work full time. I'm very happy about that. I do have enough hobbies that I can do. There are some limitations there. As far as like the biggest limitations, I do occasionally still have seizures. We don't entirely know the cause, but they are lessening of late.
Was that something that you were dealing with from the beginning? Like, has this always been?
Yeah, and they've kind of come and gone. And I guess for the benefit of everyone listening, I'll identify my triggers. But of course, stress is a massive trigger. But initially they just happened, which I'm sure was the inflammation in the brain. Anything inflammation will cause it. Later, it was medication. I was taking tramadol for headaches, and it wasn't a huge dose, but I do think there was something when, because I wasn't on it consistently, I kind of take it as needed. I think there was always this little bit of a rebound. If I took it at, 3 p.m. or, whatever it was, I go to bed that night, maybe about 11 p.m. It's kind of flushing out of my system. I do think you get kind of these micro withdrawals that maybe aren't a big thing for a healthy brain, but for an injured brain, I think you kind of get pushed above that seizure threshold, and I would sometimes have them. Again, don't know if that's true. That's just kind of my best guess. And then later, I was mentioning be careful with the vitamins. I did have a bad response to B6, actually, where it was one where I had no idea that something like that could build up in your system, and it absolutely did. And I think that was the cause of them for a while. And that's been flushing out of my system. And as it leaves, the seizures have been lessening both in frequency and intensity. So a lot of things that can cause it, but I think those were big. And then, seizures, seizures are very mild now. It's not... Even when it happens, it's just not so bothersome. They're so rare. The big one that I think prevents me from returning to the majority of the life that I'm still missing is the left ear is still bad. I still have hyperacusis, and it is just one ear, so I can manage a little bit. And it is something there, maybe the last couple of months as those vitamin levels have started to stabilize. And I'm not on any medication anymore. I think the signals are starting to calm down a little bit. So it's maybe at 70% of where it was 2 months ago, which is hugely helpful. I will take anything. I'll take 1%. But if I could get that back to, let's say, only 30% damaged, I think I'd be back to the vast majority of my life.
Okay. And I wish there was like a magic thing that we could do to make that happen. But
me too. That's why.
Knowing you'll keep searching, and you'll find something amazing, and the world will benefit from it. So thank you in advance for fixing your ear.
I hope you're right. I hope I find it, because I'd certainly like to use it.
Yeah. Well, in a few, down the road, we'll have you come back and talk to yourself now, your current self, and give me one answers.
I could do.
If only. Do you want to share? I would love for you to share, if you're willing to, how you manage the anger that has come along with this.
Anger. Yes, I will share this. And like so many other things, it's another one that comes with my disclaimers. Don't live your life like me. Anything I say is probably wrong, actually. But sometimes it's we're all individuals. We all have to kind of navigate in whatever way we can. And this was one of them. But you had asked me about this a while back, is, how angry I was at what happened. And I was extremely angry, and I'm still angry. It took basically 8 years out of my life. And yeah, I've done things, but there's been some real hard times, and I'm angry, and how could you not be? And there's no point being angry at the mosquito who bit me, because that doesn't do you any good. But what I ended up kind of landing on is I just became really angry just at the overall concept of brain injuries in general. Just the fact that stupid little disease exists, and that entity, the entity of a brain injury, became my enemy. And anything I can do to beat that, I'm going to do it. And even when I was at those dark times I told you about, laying in a dark room at night, in horrible pain, and I would just trash talk that injury. And I would tell you better kill me now. Hurry up, because if I survive this, I'm coming for you. It's like, not only am I going to kick you out of my body, I'm going to kick you out of every body that I find you in. And it kind of became a thing, and now I do work at the clinic. We have those scans and the prototypes and, number of other things that I do. And every time a patient comes in and they're infested with my worst enemy, that brain injury, like I just get wound up. I just want to kill that thing so bad. So, I see patients come in and, end of a week or end of 2 weeks, however long their particular treatment is. We do a lot of 2-week patients now. They leave and they're feeling better. And I'm just so happy. That's one more enemy I've beaten. And any ally I can find too, if I run into somebody and, they're really suffering and if, they're thinking about treatments and, maybe they're talking to me about it, is it worth it? Or they're, thinking about some other things, that person is immediately a friend. Because how could they not be? They're fighting my worst enemy. Of course, they're my friend. I will do anything to help this person fight the thing that I hate the most. So maybe it isn't the healthiest mindset to have all day, but it is my mindset. And I've found it useful. As long as I'm channeling all of my anger in that direction, then it's not causing me problems elsewhere in my life.
Thank you for sharing that. I love it, and the good that you've done with it because of that is pretty impressive. Is there anything else, any other lessons that you've learned from all of this that you would like to share, or that you think people would benefit from hearing?
Any more lessons? I think you covered the majority of it. Let me see if I can go through my lessons Rolodex. Not sure. So yeah, anger and dark times and how to kind of have other people adapt. Maybe one last thing. I'll toss this out. I don't know if it's anything, but it's very easy to kind of fall into that trap of I lost so much of my life, and you did. There's no getting around that. You did lose it, and you've grieved it, and you kind of move on. But like so many other things in grief, like it's eventually it kind of transforms from something you've lost into my life is just different now. And there are some things that are better, and there are some things that are worse. My job now is actually a lot better to the job that I had before, and I'm kind of reluctant to say that because some people from my last job might be hearing it, but. This one, it is a better match for me personally. And, with that kind of, anger that we just discussed, I think I enjoy it more. So, I did lose that job. I went down to 10 hours a week, and then I wasn't going to stay there because it just wasn't a fit, but I gained one that I ended up liking better and, pays better too, but that's different. We'll discuss that another time. So, yeah, I did lose, and then I gained something else, and it's like, this actually is okay. And I think that's true of so much with grief, even something, I don't want to tie this together, but maybe it's an effective analogy. You lose somebody you were close to, and that's it. And you can't replace them. You're not going to replace them. You're not going to get anybody else to replace that person. That they are just gone. But a year or so later, you do form new relationships, and they occupy kind of a different place in your life, and you kind of learn to live your life with that new state. And I think this is very similar. So I was actually going through something, last couple of weeks, as kind of these hormone vitamin levels have been getting more stable in my body. I've noticed that, my exercises at the gym have been better. And, I work out for about 20 minutes. And after about 20 minutes, I kind of power up, and then I'm good for about an hour. And in the past, I wasn't like that. I could go about 20 minutes and then I was tired. And, it sounds a little bit better. Sometimes it's not that, sometimes it's a little bit worse, but really it just feels like I'm living inside of a different body than what I was used to. And, it's capable of some things that are more and some things that are less. And, sometimes I see things differently now because of my experiences, whatever. And again, sometimes it's better, sometimes it's worse, but, it's a new life. And so kind of just start from scratch, I guess. It's not always happy. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying, new beginning, things like that, but it is kind of where you are now. So, you kind of just run with it.
Sorry, I just have to let that sink in for a minute.
Please do. It's more rambly than I cared for, but.
No, I think it was really good. And I think it just seems like a very real perspective, which I appreciate. It's not trying to sugarcoat anything, but recognizing there are good things and there are really hard things. And I think that just is kind of an acknowledgement of life in general. So keeping that.
I think that's always going to be true. Yeah. And, the hard things and the good things that I had 8 years ago are very different from the hard things and the good things that I have right now. And I think if I could kind of snap my fingers and go back to that pre-injury body, I'd probably do it. But I haven't yet invented that prototype. so that's out, so, you can't do it. You have no choice but to live in this new brain and new body. So, adapt to it, see what it can do. And, that's really just it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think too, and maybe this is going back to something that you said earlier about, if you could go back in time, you'd tell yourself to find CFX sooner, right?
Right.
But this is personally, I like to choose the thought that we find the things, we come across the experiences that we need to have that will help us to become the people we need to be in the exact right time, like the trust in the timing of how things come about. And so you found CFX exactly when you were supposed to, and all of these events and the ways that you've grown and learned have happened exactly right. It's just a peaceful way for me to see things, at least in my own life, because then I can let go of all of the what ifs. but I think that kind of applies to what you were just saying too. Like, this is, it is what it is, and let's assume that it's the way it's supposed to be, and let's move forward and do the best we can with what we've got.
Yeah. I'm not growing back that lost brain tissue. Right, it's gone. So, I'd love to, but it's gone. So yeah, you make do with what you have. And I think that's true with everything. I've heard that before too. It's like, things happen at exactly the time they're supposed to. And honestly, I don't know if that's true, but I do know that's when things happened. And that's it.
Yeah,
so
right?
Okay, it's in the past, right? I can't do anything about that, but the rest of today I have reasonable control over. So, take whatever I have, do whatever I can today. And, that's it. And again, these are very easy things for me to say now that I'm kind of past the worst of it. And I would not have said this in my darkest times. So, something to think of kind of if you're going through that dark time is, this guy, he's saying, no, I wasn't saying this back then. I'm saying this now. But kind of when I do think like that, and I do have kind of those new dark times, it does kind of get me through it a little bit faster.
Yeah. And I appreciate you saying that too, because I do feel like it can be helpful when we are in those dark times to hear from people who have been through it and are on the other side, at least at this point, right? Like, and we have, and just knowing that there's hope for brighter days ahead is important, an important message, I think. So thank you, Heath. I'm so glad that we were able to make this happen. It has been
my pleasure. I appreciate you having me.
But yeah, no, this was so good. And yeah, I'm tempted to be like, all right, let's do another one of these at some point.
Well, I'm down. We'll see if anybody likes the first one.
See what happens.
Yeah, if you get some clicks, I'd be happy to do another one. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here. This was really, really excellent, and I appreciate everything that you shared today.
Well, thank you so much. It was great seeing you.
I'm so glad you listened in today. I hope you have gained some helpful insights and inspiration regarding dealing with and recovering from concussions. My goal is to create more awareness and education about concussions and the fact that there is so much that can be done to improve life after someone has had one. Help me spread the message by liking, commenting, rating, and subscribing to this podcast, and share it with others who would benefit from hearing it. There are more resources available on my website. And again, if you or someone you love would benefit from concussion coaching, sign up for a free consultation using the link in the show notes or at my website, www.theconcussioncoach.com. Thank you. See you next time, and take good care of that amazing brain of yours.